So get everybody to settle down. I had the delightful task of introducing Diana Hart. When I first got a hold of Diana, we were sending emails back and forth and wanted to know what sort of elaborate introduction she would like. She said the one off of the schedule is perfect. So I'm really going to just reread what you actually all have in front of you. The reason I got to do this was because I have an association with the Hart family that goes back about 60-some years. My father was their home service delivery man for Palm Dairies. I've been in the Hart house. As the family can say, yes, we helped feed you for many years. And I was at Ernest Manning High School getting pummeled by both Smith and Keith through the years in football days. I have been a football tackling dummy before. So I'm just going to read this. Born into the legendary Hart wrestling family, Diana Hart grew up surrounded by larger-than-life personalities, both in and out of the ring. As the 11th of 12 children, she experienced a home filled with love, athleticism, and an unbreakable bond forged through wrestling. The Harts embodied grit, toughness, and respect, navigating triumphs and tragedies with unwavering dignity to leave one of the most colorful and influential legacies in wrestling history. And with that note, Diana Hart.
Good afternoon. Thank you for joining me today. A special thank you to Kathleen Rogers and Walt DeBonny of the Southern Alberta Pioneers for inviting me to take part in this year's Calgary Historic Week. To my sister Allison, thank you for your help with photos and the PowerPoint arrangements. And to my sweet boyfriend, Tom Forzani, thank you for giving me the freedom and your patience to get me ready for today. This is a big honor for me, as I proudly share with you now what it's meant for me to be a face in the crowd. I'm Diana Hart, the 11th of 12 children, born into the legendary Hart wrestling dynasty, and I hope you enjoy my speech. To be well received in this is a real plus, but most of all, my hope is that you believe in what we did. My mom, my dad, our family, and me. My brother Owen arrived about a year and a half after I was born, and we were officially the last babies of the dozen children my mom and dad had. We were doted on by everyone. We were treated like little dolls, getting picked up and hugged all the time, and I don't ever remember even being scolded by anyone back then. My mom, Helen Hart, a charming beauty from Long Beach, was the first girl in New York City to be accelerated in school and she graduated quite young. Instead of going to university, she gave her scholarship money to her family, and at 15, she became the secretary to the school board superintendent and continued to help support her family. It was during these days she gained valuable experience running a busy office. When she met my dad, she didn't know anything about wrestling, and not much about domestic matters either, because she had spent most of her life either studying or managing a busy office. It was just a matter of time, though, before she became the Queen of Hearts. My dad was a determined farm kid from Saskatoon, handsome, capable, and already making a name for himself before becoming a pro wrestler. He qualified to represent Canada in amateur wrestling for the Olympics, but they were canceled twice because of World War II. He joined the Canadian Navy, spent his furloughs in New York, where his outstanding abilities as a submission wrestler caught the eye of New York promoters. They encouraged him to go pro without delay. At that time, he dreamed of an Olympic gold, just like my mom had dreamed of going to university. But after the war ended, the chance to earn good money took priority. My dad cherished my mom, and he loved how she could be so brilliant, yet she had an endearing kind of helplessness about her that amplified his genuine desire to always take care of her, which she loved about him, along with his bright blue eyes and how very sweet he was to her. He was an athletic Canadian wrestler, while she was a refined little New York bookworm. She joked that they had nothing in common, and maybe that was the secret to their success. They married in New York City in a blizzard on New Year's Eve, 1947, and their life as a married couple began. In 1951, my parents moved to Calgary, bought the Hart house and the 20 acres it sat on. It was in 1905 that it was built, and it has 22 rooms, a grand ballroom, 4 fireplaces, an incinerator, and lots of character. When they bought it, they asked if the cat could stay, which it did, and soon many more of our own animals followed. In 1951, my parents also established their company, the Foothills Athletic Club, and out of that company, their promotion, Stampede Wrestling began, growing strong roots, as did the 12 kids, right from within the Hart house. In the office upstairs, my mom, who had so much patience and etiquette, would be setting up towns, doing the weekly payroll, bookkeeping, the press releases and posters, and handling the phone calls, and it was only a party line back then. It's quite something how my mom navigated so much from within that little office, in addition to helping my dad raise their large family. Visitors came by, sometimes a little rough around the edges, but generally they were respectful to the fact that there were lots of children around. Wrestlers trained in the basement, but if someone was there to talk to my dad about a business matter, they usually waited in the dining room or the front hall for my dad, and they would talk business there. The kitchen and the office upstairs were off limits to give our mom and the family some privacy. Outsiders rarely saw my mom, but once in a while, she could be spotted proudly walking with her daughters downtown or going to the zoo with some of the kids. It was hard, though, to get us all in one car, and our mom never learned how to drive. You see, in 1949, while my dad was teaching her how to drive, they were victims of a serious hit-and-run car accident during her pregnancy with my brother Bruce. After that, she didn't really pursue learning to drive, so my dad did most of the driving until the older kids could. From the one desk they shared in the office, my mom and dad ran the wrestling business. It was a constant flurry of phone calls, typing, and sometimes serious conversations, but they still found time to take care of all of us, absolutely. Because the office was right in the middle of the upstairs, where we, the 12 kids, saw and heard it all, well, the pressure that my mom and dad faced all the time made us really protective and defensive of Stampede Wrestling. That little office was like the little engine that could. My mom handled the desk while my dad booked wrestlers from around the world, and then he wrestled on the road, and he built his own rings, ones still talked about today. He used the more expensive fir wood for the planks, nautical jute for the ropes, tightly taped over and over and immobilized by chains to steel ring posts. Wrestlers said they were better than anything used in other territories, even in rings now. My brothers eventually became the ring crew and also handled jobs starting as little kids on Friday nights in Calgary selling wrestling programs, to later taking tickets at the door, timekeeping, driving the vans and buses, wrestling, training wrestlers, refereeing, and producing the TV show. My brother Ross became the Stampede Wrestling TV show producer, working every Friday alongside Ed Whalen. Learning from our mom, who was a terrific writer, Ross cleverly wrote the weekly body press wrestling program, and later, with our brother Bruce, spent a lot of time training wrestlers, helping them learn the fundamentals of pro wrestling, which is absolutely essential, but seems to be lacking in today's product. Through his time as a producer, writer, and trainer, Ross is a walking wrestling almanac. My brother Wayne was easily the best referee and driver the promotion ever had. Focused, fast, and reliable. He has a sharp eye and a good memory, without taking sides about situations that happened in the ring or on the road. Wayne is very mathematically sound, even incorporating that mindset into his successful billiard and pool playing career. He is the only one of my siblings that can play musical instruments, the mouth harp and the harmonica, like our dad. Bruce, Keith, and Ross all taught school. Keith, on top of wrestling and teaching, was a Calgary firefighter, rugby player, and a tough amateur wrestler from the University of Saskatchewan. Keith could handle himself with even the most disagreeable wrestlers or rowdy fans, who could be sometimes pretty aggressive in some countries. Bruce and Keith toured all over the world in singles and as a tag team. And Smith wrestled in many countries as well, starting in the early 70s in Japan. He was my only brother to wrestle in the Japanese dojo for almost a year. He especially loved Puerto Rico, where my brother Brett joined him in August 78, near the beginning of Brett's pro career. On the administrative side, my sister Allison who became later a librarian, like our mom, a bookworm and a very good organizer as well. She sometimes helped our mom with the daunting weekly payroll, although our mom was reluctant at times to let anyone help, even family, because so much depended on the office running flawlessly. Ellie, the first daughter after 5 sons, is a talented artist. I remember her sculpting a wrestler's fist out of wet clay and spray painting it silver to make a trophy after the real one was smashed just hours before a big live show. Georgia, who later became a culinary chef, was the finder in the family. She and Ellie were known to work late into the night, creating, fixing, baking, and finding lost items, usually to the relief of those who needed their help. Everyone contributed in meaningful ways, and I'd like to introduce to you now who everyone is, starting with the oldest boy, Smith, then Bruce, Keith, Wayne, Dean, Ellie, Georgia, Brett, Allison, Ross, then me and Owen. We were a big family with a big house on an acreage outside the city limits. That rural living, plus the wrestling business, which some outsiders thought of as uncivilized, well, it sort of gave us the freedom to live by our own rules. We chose to dance to the beat of our own drum, and generally didn't get seduced by fads or trends. My dad wouldn't have allowed it, and I don't think we could have afforded it. But whatever the reasons, we really didn't fit in. We were different. We had our own way of life, and to knock it or mock it, or worst of all, try to take it away from anyone in our family, well, that was when we fought hard, even to the end of a sometimes losing battle, to stand our ground. While there was prosperity that allowed my parents to acquire assets like a restaurant, a beach, and an airplane to fly wrestlers in, there were challenging times, like when the Boxing and Wrestling Commission revoked my father's wrestling license more than once, and lack of money for long spells, especially when you're raising 12 children and looking after the wrestlers and their families. Well, lack of money was a huge concern. In the 80s, I was old enough and there to see it when they revoked my dad's license the second time, and he began running his televised Friday night shows out at the Sarcee Reservation, where there was no commission, and he was welcomed with open arms. It was just challenging for fans, particularly during that winter, to get to the Sarcee Arena due to it being so far outside of the city. Like many people who become involved in wrestling, my parents didn't particularly care for the overreach of authority. They were self-employed by choice, not working for anyone. But they still had to deal with commissions, agencies, and boards. In the 1980s, I recall my mom and dad battling the Calgary Exhibition Board, like when my dad had to run his big Stampede Week shows out of a tent on the Stampede grounds, because the exhibition board booked their live auctions, coincidentally the very same Friday nights that my dad's weekly televised show was to take place. And for some reason, they couldn't run the auctions earlier in the day or on a different day. And I'm almost sure they charged him more for the rent of the tent. All water under the bridge now, but I think certain people and groups went out of their way to make things difficult for the wrestling. There were other setbacks, financial troubles at times, a lot of that stemming from bad or no press that led to poor gates, and on those long road trips, there were ring and travel vans breaking down in the harsh winters or overheating in the summer, and there were injuries and accidents and even death. Stampede wrestling was like a stone soup. My parents made something out of nothing at times, and a key ingredient was Ed Whalen as our TV commentator. Ed was sports-minded, well-versed, quick-thinking, and he was funny. His wrestling commentary with the wrestlers made for some classic material. No one knew how anything would unfold because it was all improvised. Scripts and rehearsals did not exist in Stampede wrestling. Like many of their generation, my parents grew up in extreme poverty, experiencing the devastation of the Great Depression and World War II, and even the First World War for my dad, who was born as it was happening. Barefoot and dirt poor, he and his two older sisters rode a single horse, no saddle, for miles to attend a country school in the middle of nowhere, if they even got there. He and his family spent 2 brutal Saskatchewan winters living in a tent, physically trying to hold on to their homesteaded land that was being confiscated by the government over a tax dispute. My dad hunted wild hares and birds with a slingshot to keep from starving to death. He didn't complain or even talk about it much, about how hard his life was, but I could tell he enjoyed good food, especially a good cup of tea, and I appreciated why he did not like to see good food go to waste. My mom went from wealth and privilege to blatant poverty overnight when the 1929 stock market crash hit, and they headed into World War II with nothing. As a teenager, she weighed less than 100 pounds. Food was rationed. They didn't waste anything, and they were grateful for whatever they did have each day. Both my parents had strong faith in God, thanking Jesus for getting them through thick and thin. Despite strong faith, my mom was a chronic worrier, even in good times, and my dad was an optimist, even in bad times. So, there was compromise, and Stampede Wrestling became the heartbeat of that compromise. It physically came to some town or city across Western Canada, sometimes Montana, for over 40 years, plus the weekly TV show. No matter what was happening in our household or the world, the show must go on was our habitual, if not instinctive motto. We grew a lot of our own vegetables on our acreage. We had a root cellar, later claimed once by our sweet Hawaiian pit bull, Wanakila, when she had her puppies one year. During lean years that I was old enough to remember, in the 70s, the Safeway butcher Jerry would get my dad the discarded raw bones and meat trimmings and a lot of the distressed fruit and vegetables, and that helped a lot in feeding a family of 14. But we were more self-sufficient in earlier years when we had our own chickens and one rooster, whose name was Mighty, for our fresh eggs, and we had Jersey cows and goats for our own raw milk and butter. It was our family's goats that eventually became additions to the Calgary Zoo through a fellow named Jim Baines. I think it was Baines who said something about my mom and dad having too many kids, but someone thought he was talking about the children when he was actually referring to the baby goats. Our home wasn't just filled with kids, goats or otherwise. It was filled with athletes. It was filled with athletes from around the world. Stampede Wrestling drew stars like Andre the Giant, Abdullah the Butcher, the Wild Samoans, superstar Billy Graham, Tor Kamada, the Cuban Assassins, the Kiwis, who later became known as the Bushwhackers, and Archie the Stomper Goldie, some even making Calgary their permanent homes. We had the midget wrestlers like Little Beaver, Fuzzy Cupid, Sky Low, come through come through the territory a few times a year, and in a way it was like a family. Keeping it in the family, when my dad brought Billy and Benny McGuire, the world's heaviest twins, who rode around on these little Honda motorbikes, to work in the territory one summer, he arranged for them to stay at my brother-in-law, BJ's gym, a place that could definitely house those two big fellows, because it was a powerlifting and boxing club. And speaking of boxing, some of the world's most famous boxers, including Muhammad Ali, Jersey Joe Walcott, Jack Dempsey, Primo Carnera, Joe Louis, and Rocky Marciano, guest refereed special bouts for my dad. They considered my dad their friend, not just a promoter. My dad once wrestled a Siberian tiger, Kiki, I think her name was, later describing her as a natural grappler and a beautiful animal. According to my brother Smith, none of the wrestlers would go into the ring with the tiger, so my dad did. And when he locked up with that big cat, he said the muscles in her cheeks were like tennis balls. We had wild animals come through the house once, through my dad's good friend Al Oman, who owned the Alberta Game Farm. Al would stop by from time to time with his pet wolf or pet cheetah, who had this marvelous loud purr when I brush her whiskers and fur with my hairbrush. And there was Terrible Ted, the wrestling bear, who lived in the basement for a while. He hibernated down there, and when spring came, he was friendly, and he even enjoyed ice cream with my older brothers and sisters. His owner, Mike Dubois, a legitimate mountain man, found him as an orphan bear and took him under his wing and taught him how to wrestle, and he named him Ted. I guess no hotel could accommodate Mike with Ted, so my dad said Ted could sleep over, to hibernate. I remember one time as a kid going to the matches, which was rare because the daughters usually didn't go. Owen and I got to meet a monkey named Bear from the TV show BJ and the Bear. He was charming and he had coffee with Owen, and he even gave my dad his autograph. Life back then was full of characters: midgets, cats, bears, giants, assassins, goats, butchers, stompers, kiwis, and monkeys. And in Hart tradition, it was wildly unconventional. I still wonder whatever happened to that monkey's autograph. Clearwater Beach was this Shangri-La of a place my mom and dad bought in the 60s and owned it for about 15 years. It was just a few miles out of town, off what used to be Twin Bridges and what's now Elbow Valley. It was maybe 60 acres, and the Elbow River ran through it. With enough of a river current, they built two man-made lakes, one with deep water and a dock in the middle with a diving board, and one with shallow water for the little kids. People could camp out there for a week or just stay for the day. My brothers and sisters and their friends helped run the beach, and it became quite the summer getaway. My brother Dean, mainly him, ran concerts out there, and I remember sitting on the roof of the big concession stand, watching the bands play at night in front of all these people. It was really fun as kids growing up to have that beautiful place as our own. Another beautiful place for us was the Hart House, and that's where I met Davy Boy Smith in the late spring of 1981, standing under the big chandelier in the front hall. He was only 18, from a small town in northern England called Galborn, and he had come to work for my dad on a 9-month visa. He caught my eye right away, handsome and fit, and I heard his thick Lancashire accent while chatting with him about an infected insect bite on his arm. Well, I was quite captured by that whole conversation, and then, a few days later, saw him wrestling on TV in my dad's kitchen, and after that, I was determined to one day be his wife. Davy had that edge even before coming to Calgary, much like his older cousin, the Dynamite Kid, and they could do explosive, high-flying moves with real authority in ways that mattered in the ring, unlike anything any of us had ever seen before. And Davy worked hard in the gym, always training to get stronger. It paid off because he became iconic in Japan and the WWF, winning tag team titles with the Dynamite Kid, and later making a name for himself as a singles wrestler, known as the British Bulldog. He drew huge crowds, broke attendance and merchandise records, and won many prominent championships. Our wedding in the fall of 1984 was more than just a huge day for me and Davy. It was a historic moment for our family. The ceremony coincided with the farewell to Stampede Wrestling, which the WWF had recently purchased, maybe just a month before, for my mom and dad, and they were finally going to retire. A couple hundred guests were there to bid farewell to Stampede Wrestling, as well as attend Davy's and my wedding. It was so fitting that our wedding took place pretty much in the same spot where I first met Davy. Later, around 1986, my father had a chance to reopen the territory, and that brought in new talent, like my brother Owen and Brian Pillman, who became my brother Bruce's international tag team partner. Bruce was a very good ideas man and created a lot of unusual and original wrestling characters and themes for Stampede, and later, some of those ideas were incorporated into the WWF. Bruce was instrumental in teaching Owen, Brian, and many others, including my son Harry, about wrestling psychology and the live crowds. Owen and Brian would eventually join WWF, but Stampede only stayed open for a few years. When it started back up again in '86, it was just a lot for my mom, whose heart wasn't in it anymore, not like my dad's. So Stampede Wrestling closed its doors in late 1989. But even those few years made a big impact in wrestling here and around the world. We had our own gymnasium in the basement with custom equipment built by my dad, just like the wrestling rings he built in our carriage house, known then as Katie's, after Katie Ohe, the celebrated Canadian sculptor, who used it as her art studio. We'd often watch her work, and she'd explain her sculpting projects to us. Katie drove this Volkswagen Beetle with all the seats removed except for the driver's seat, so she could haul around her welding equipment, tools, and supplies. One day my dad's car wouldn't start, so he had to borrow Katie's bug to get us to school. About 7 kids and my dad piled into the car like clowns in the circus, and the stick shift was not easy to find or maneuver with all of us in there. So it seemed like we were running on kangaroo petrol. After Katie moved her studio to Springbank, our carriage house turned into quite the grand central station for a lot of projects. As business picked up around '78, we acquired dozens of handsome Cadillacs that later became part of Stampede Wrestling's fleet, and my dad welded trailer hitches onto each one of them for towing, mostly wrestling rings. But I'll never forget seeing my dad's beautiful Brougham Elegance proudly tow home our Greyhound bus that had broken down. It was marvelously unconventional, and it was things like that that gave me so much belief in how my dad thought, which was outside of the box. Over time, major changes came to fruition. A huge underground sprinkler tank that we all helped dig out, a new brick balcony and porch, which my brother Wayne cleaned hundreds of bricks for, 2 asphalt driveways framed by 4 huge brick pillars, acres and acres of landscaping. So from the time my mom and dad bought the house in 1952 to the time it sold around 2004, they turned it from a friendly farmhouse into a friendly mansion. Around 1978, my dad renovated the kitchen into quite the commercial space, stainless steel everywhere, an 8-burner stove, 4-door fridge and 4-door freezer, a rotisserie oven that could cook at least a dozen chickens, and even 2 separate phone lines in the stairwell. In the early 80s, my mom and dad eventually began to host regular Sunday dinners. They considered it a blessing to be able to generously and lovingly prepare and share this huge weekly feast of very nice food to a growing number of family members and guests. Those Sunday dinners came from a really sincere place in my parents' hearts. Just off the kitchen was the door to the basement. Open that door, you find an industrial cast iron stairway leading down to the gymnasium. As Stampede Wrestling rose to international fame, the gymnasium one day just became known as the Dungeon. I don't know how it got that name, but it fits. It was rugged, grueling, salty, gritty. Lots of blood, sweat, and tears were shed down there. And through the training, there was usually a friendly dog or cat sauntering by to say hi. And it was in the Dungeon that my dad trained Jim the Anvil Neidhart, a former Oakland Raiders, who later married my sister Ellie. Jim and my brother-in-law BJ, my sister George's husband, were influential in suggestions to my dad about what to build or acquire for the Dungeon. And my dad bought hundreds of pounds of nickel plate weight with the name Hart deeply engraved into every single piece. And there was equipment for every body part, including a neck machine for the amateur wrestlers and a speed bag for boxing. And it is worth noting that Ellie and Jim's daughter Natty and Georgia and BJ's son Ted both have worked hard to make names for themselves in wrestling. Natty married TJ, who, along with my son Harry, became WWE superstars as tag team champions, with Natty as their manager. And my nephew Ted was Harry's tag team partner during their time in Major League Wrestling. Natty, TJ, Ted, and Harry, and a cast of other talented youngsters, got together and formed Mat Rats around 2001. It was a kids' wrestling federation, and it was syndicated for one season by Mandalay Television Productions. In the gymnasium, pre-Dungeon days, I was inspired by the '76 Olympics, and I started training down there with Owen on the mats, lifting weights, and even using the ceiling pipes to build strength, endurance, and acrobatic skills. My love for fitness grew. I became a regular jazzerciser, which eventually led me into competitive bodybuilding by 1989. My dad saw my dedication and was proud that I stuck with it, even turning it into a bit of a career in fitness modeling. In fact, I was named 1983 Sunshine Girl of the Year. Later, I got involved in pro wrestling, working as a ringside manager for Davey and at times for Davey and Owen during their reign together in WWF. In 1997, I won the Mrs. Calgary pageant and appeared at the Saddle Dome with my brothers for the WWF Canadian Stampede pay-per-view. That night was a huge moment for our family, and I was proud to be part of it. Thanks to a lot of that, there's now a wrestling action figure of me, and I appear in a comic book, both alongside Davey. I studied Canadian literature and art at the University of Calgary. I trained in gyms around the world, and while traveling with Davey, and through it all, my greatest joy, privilege, and responsibility came from being a wife and a mom. My life was grand, it really was. Then, around 2005, things changed. I lost interest in almost everything and sank into depression. So I returned to jazzercise. I started training again at BJ's, and eventually I competed in bodybuilding at the Women's Masters. I was grieving the loss of my mom and dad, Owen, Davey, the sale of the house, and my old wrestling life. So training and being back on stage felt like a way to reconnect with them. And I imagined that they were watching from above and cheering me on. A few years later, depression hit me again, but this time, creative writing helped me through it. Over 5 years, I wrote 3 novels, and they became an award-winning sports romance trilogy called Cauliflower Hart. Not Hart like my last name, but Hart as in passion. This physical story is about, no surprise, a girl growing up in wrestling. But this young girl has only 1 sibling, not 11, and a lot of other differences, but you'd have to read the book to find out. My brother Brett, he's sort of the middle child, number 8 of the 12 kids, and he certainly stands out, not just in my eyes, but in the eyes of millions of wrestling fans, so many of those from Calgary. They really love Brett and his wrestling character, the Hitman, and for good reason. Brett's impressive career, well, he was considered the most famous Canadian in the world. and he's regarded as one of the greatest professional wrestlers of all time, known for his solid technical mastery and storytelling in the ring. And he certainly has played a terrific and integral part in my family's deep-rooted connection to Calgary, extending beyond wrestling. Brett, along with Theo Fleury of the Calgary Flames, were two of the original founders of the Calgary Hitmen hockey team. Pioneering it at the grassroots level. Brett has raised boundless awareness for the Canadian Heart and Stroke Foundation, as well as prostate cancer, which he survived, but sadly took our oldest brother Smith back on July 2nd, 2017. Smith lived a full and unconventional life, a common theme in my family, and it earned him quite a following because he was a truly original and authentic character. On July 15, 1996, young Matt Annis, my nephew and beloved son of Georgia and BJ, tragically succumbed to severe illness known as necrotizing fasciitis, or flesh-eating disease. My nephew Matt was a great kid. He was thoughtful, athletic, and passionate about wrestling. He shared a strong bond with my son Harry, and they aspired to become a wrestling tag team in their future. This brutal illness took hold of Matt for 10 days before his ultimate passing at the age of 13, leaving everyone numb and heartbroken, especially his mom and dad. Matt certainly inspired his cousins, including my son Harry, to continue on in wrestling, and I feel his spirit is with them today. A few years later, another heartbreaking event struck our family on May 23rd, when my brother Owen tragically passed away during a pay-per-view event in Kansas City. Losing Owen was beyond devastating, not just for the families involved, but for the entire wrestling world. Owen was charismatic, talented, and genuinely loved, and his absence left a gaping hole that is never quite closed. His affectionate mischief is dearly missed. After Owen's death, his widow Martha established the Owen Hart Foundation, a Calgary-based charity that honors the legacy of Owen by providing scholarships, housing support, and community programs to help individuals with limited resources achieve their potential. My brother Dean and Owen both passed away in their 30s. Owen just 34, Dean 36. Dean's passing on November 21st, 1990 was from kidney issues stemming from when he got hit by a Calgary Transit bus in his 20s. And those issues unfortunately evolved into Bright's disease. Dean, perhaps the gutsiest of all of my brothers, was notably the first person, got the slides mixed up, I think, sorry. Oh, rats, there we go, sorry. Hope I've been switching them all this time. Gosh, did you see that with the one?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Okay, Dean, perhaps the gutsiest of all my siblings, was the first person to promote an outdoor concert at McMahon Stadium when he brought the popular country singer Charlie Rich to town in the summer of 1977. Oddly enough, this huge accomplishment of his has zero coverage in any of the archives I've researched, but it happened. I remember it was a hot Saturday night, and from my dad's balcony, before the townhouses were built out in front, I could see in the distance a stream of cars lined up on 16th Avenue waiting to get in to see the show. Dean was barely 20 when he started promoting concerts, including bringing the now iconic Canadian rock band Rush and also Nazareth to Clearwater Beach, and bands like Rufus, Iron Butterfly, and Edward Bear to the Stampede Corral. He spent a lot of time in Hawaii. He just loved it there, and he helped bring Stampede Wrestling and Samoan wrestlers together. My three departed brothers, Smith, Dean, and Owen, were instrumental in helping me to think critically. Smith was the eldest, Owen the youngest, Dean the smallest of the brothers. They each learned how to stand up for themselves, not just with the siblings, but in and out of wrestling. That kind of tenacity, strong in my whole family, taught them to challenge anything that they felt was off or bent. Like our mom and dad, they didn't back down easily or give in to authority easily, especially when they were in the right. Our mom was profoundly affected by the death of Owen. She passed away on November 4th, 2001, following a period of deep sorrow. Owen held a special place in my mom's and dad's hearts, as he did with everyone. But he was their baby boy, and their bond was exceptionally strong. The difficult times that ensued from his death deeply impacted my mom. Although she remained devoted to my father and the entire family, she found it challenging to continue. Until that point, her health was relatively stable, though not exceptional, and the grief over losing Owen significantly tested her will to carry on. Within a year of my mom's very sad passing, another heartbreaking loss shook our family. May 18th, 2002, Davy passed away suddenly from heart failure. Davy was saddened by Matt's death, then tragedy hit his own family, with his younger sister Tracy passing quickly from cancer in the fall of 1988, followed by the unexpected death of his mother Joyce, also from cancer, in February 1999, and then Owen's death that following May, all while dealing with his broken back. I think his broken heart is actually what hurt him the most. I was unraveling myself at that time, and losing Davy was a difficult part of my life, and very hard on our two children, Harry and Georgia, who were teenagers at the time and old enough to see his suffering. We miss him a lot, but oh, what a full life he lived. The star that shines the brightest often burns out the fastest, and that was like our Davy. His significant contributions to wrestling have sometimes been misrepresented, understated, or overlooked. Nevertheless, through Harry and Georgia, Davy's great influence and brand continues on, becoming more prominent and acknowledged with all the good that he did. He was one of the best. For my dad, the immense heartbreak with the compounding losses of Dean, Matt, Owen, Davy, and my mom, who had spent more than 50 years as his wife and steadfast companion. It was really hard for him. He remained, as always, strong and never came undone, and he never had any vices. But the emotional toll after losing Owen, and then his beloved Helen, and the many major physical injuries haunting him later in life were undeniable. On October 16th, 2003, God called my dad to heaven at the age of 88, joining the others who were called before him. My dad's funeral was a remarkable tribute to his great and honorable legacy. Nearly 500 attendees gathered at the funeral home, including Alberta Premier Ralph Klein, who spoke at it in honor of their friendship. My son Harry, like his dad, has diligently pursued an elite career in grappling and pro wrestling that started at the age of 8 when he had his first pro wrestling match against his cousin Matt at the Rockyford Rodeo. Harry is currently making his home in Tokyo for All Japan Pro Wrestling as a much sought after heavyweight in a country where wrestling is next level tough and highly respected. Harry has wrestled on several of Josh Barnett's MMA Bloodsport events and has been a title holder in nearly every major current wrestling promotion to date. And my daughter Georgia, wow, she's significantly contributed to wrestling through her social media pages dedicated to promoting her father's amazing legacy. She has made milestones on Davy's social media pages, being instrumental in his induction to the WWE Hall of Fame class of 2020. With professionalism and integrity, she consistently posts about her father and even helped create a Pilsner beer in Tampa, Florida called Hey Bulldog. Harry and Georgia and I are a close family, finding happiness and rewards in what we share collectively, like promoting Davy's legacy, celebrating Harry's wrestling career, and enjoying our many animals, even if we live in 3 different countries nowadays. Every now and then, I'll park at the bottom of the Hart Hill. Every now and then, I'll park at the bottom of the hill outside the old Hart house and just reflect. What I take in through my eyes goes straight to my heart. When I look at that outstanding house with its 3 solid brick stories, I see my dad, and I remember the principled foundation he laid, and I long for his leadership. While the distinctive angles of that beautifully gabled roof that lovingly weathered us through so many storms reminds me of my mom. That house was my mom and dad. And although the house appears now lonely to me without the presence of the Harts, the grandchildren, the animals, the Cadillacs, the buses, the wrestlers, and the wrestling rings, I am grateful it's been designated a heritage site to ensure its preservation. My life has been rich from the influence of my brothers and sisters, each one a teacher and a friend, and I'm proud of them for all they've accomplished and conquered. I can't express well enough my thanks to them for how they fortified me in valuable ways, like teaching me how to drive, how to play football by Hart rules, how to grapple, how to stick up for wrestling, and I will never forget how they stuck up for me when I was a kid. I'm always moved when people share their memories of growing up with Stampede Wrestling, watching it every Saturday with their grandparents, or attending shows when it came to their small town a few times a year. For many, it was a safe haven, a place to escape to regularly during their own difficult times. I realized I didn't have a major role in a lot of that, not the way my parents or the rest of my family did, and I'm not a superstar, but I don't feel that I didn't hold my own because it wasn't like that in my family. I have found great happiness many times in my life because of my family, right up to this day. I almost certainly wouldn't even be here right now telling you about my life if it was not for my family. So I don't see myself as someone who got buried in the noise or someone who got lost in the shuffle. Instead, I see every day in so many ways that I am a very blessed face in the crowd. Thank you everybody so much.
Thank you, Diana. We have time for questions if anybody would like to ask any. Family, friends? Yes?
Actually, I don't have a question, but did you see your brother, Brett, play Peter Pan in the theater at the Jubilee Auditorium? It was about 2006. Your brother.
Peter Pan.
Oh, yes, he was Aladdin.
Oh, Aladdin. Oh,
Yes.
I thought it was Peter Pan. Yes, it was Aladdin, yes. It was fantastic.
Yeah, he
Think
did.
about the two, Brett in a Peter Pan costume. Brett and a.
Well, I'm not a wrestling person, but I went as a theater person, and it was really interesting because half the crowd were wrestling people, and the other half were people like me. And it was a British pantomime, and the wrestling people did not know what a pantomime was. So my daughter and I were dressed really nicely, and when we started booing, the wrestling people looked at us like, okay, those ladies look really nice until we started booing. It was a fantastic event.
Yeah, the wrestling fans, they do that sometimes. I remember, and I don't mean this in any way at all, it's just,
I remember this, and I don't mean this because I'm not being political at all. It's just typical wrestling fans. A couple of years ago, maybe 3 years ago, there was a wrestling event that we went to for Halloween, and the mayor was there, and she got in the ring to say good luck to everyone, which, you know, she was so overly nice. Like, good luck, I hope everyone, place fair and typical wrestling fans, and they're all dressed up like goblins and undertakers and stuff. Well, they started booing her, so I know what you mean. She didn't really know what to do. I kind of felt bad for her, but that's just wrestling fans. That's how they are.
Any other questions?
Tom?
Tom. Any questions?
No, I've got them all.
You're-
I've asked so many, and I've got the answers so many times, so this was just an outstanding
Well done.
combination of it all.
Oh.
Invitation. So I'll just remind you folks that we go again at 6:30 this evening. Today is still Friday. Oh yes it is. So we have Mapping Calgary's Hidden History of Transportation. And that's at 6:30 tonight with Richard DeBoer and Carol Cahill. Hope I got that right. Perfect. Thank you all for coming and safe travels.